So essentially, we are going to make time for Mr. Jolly, who has a long history here in Pinellas County. I saw him speak at the North Democratic Club a few months ago, and raise your hand if you were there. Thank you. Thank you. And I did not know, as he was standing there gesturing to where he was born, I did not know that he had been born here in Pinellas County. And hearing the story of his life, yes. So we're obviously going to be blessed with time to hear about him and his vision and his ideas. And then we're going to make time for you all. And so what's going to happen at that point is we just want questions. You'll raise your hands, and we'll bring the mics to you, and we'll make sure that you get all of your questions answered. Mr. Jolly would do his best to answer those questions. And other than that, if you guys, yeah, if you're ready, though, guys, if you're ready for tonight, would you all please say yeah? All right. Let's also reflect on this space. It's hard not to get emotional when you're in the presence of people who've made sacrifices and commitments, and you know that you've walked the talk with them. Pastor Brittany McClare, if you guys have ever heard of Pastor McClare, raise your hand, because if you remember, at this church, this congregation, this community was so welcoming. As we held about 6 months ago, we held an empty chair town hall here because Representative Luna did not come to join us, but we had an empty chair town hall, and that's when we met Pastor McClare. And so we're so grateful to be here. We know we always have a space, and we always have a place. And so let's welcome Pastor McClare. Thank you. Is that good so far? Is everything good? Okay. Are we good? Okay.
Again, thank you all for being here this evening. We have been lighting a candle each week since January of this past year in light of all that's going on in the world with our current administration. And so each Sunday morning we have a different prayer that goes with it. And I thought we would open our night with that tonight as well. No matter what faith walk or no faith that you come from, we want you to know that you're welcome in this space. And we are so glad that you are here tonight. This prayer is entitled For Freedom of Speech, written by Reverend Donna Claycomb Sokol, pastor at Mount Vernon Place United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. This candle is called the candle of peace, hope, and justice. What do you think? What do you believe? Do you agree or disagree? These are not casual questions, but rather soul-shaping, world-defining inquiries that we answer in childhood classrooms and college study groups, living rooms and boardrooms, protests and pulpits. From the beginning, this nation has promised the right to speak freely, to challenge power, question policies, mock corruption, and defend the truth. Freedom of speech is stitched into our identity, a right many assumed would never unravel. And yet today, truth tellers are being punished. Critics are being threatened with retaliation. Comedians are being canceled, with some reinstated only after facing economic or political consequences for their silencing. So today, we light the candle of peace, hope, and justice for every voice that has spoken truth, only to be harmed for doing so. For those who dare to expose the lie, name injustice, and bring relief through laughter. We light this candle for the poets and prophets, artists and academics, people of wisdom who refuse to be silent, even when those with worldly power demand it. We pray for courage and conviction of those who persist, whether the time is favorable or not, to convince, rebuke, and encourage. May we rise up as a people who will not trade truth for power or popularity. May we be strengthened to resist the temptation to chase after teachers who echo our desires, and may we hold all of those in power accountable to do all they can to protect this gift while we promise to never again take it for granted. So be it.
Thank you, Pastor McClare. So before we begin, we're going to thank you. Anytime you can help share with others the story of our indivisible group, because this has never been about us. This has been about you all and us coming together. But you also know that I teach history. I'm in the 29th year teaching history here in Florida. And by the way, just a few hours ago, I left my school for a week. I now have a week off for Thanksgiving break. So, woohoo. Thank you. Everybody. So I say that, though, because as I reflect on the last 5 years, I think we understand that the teaching of our history, maybe in my lifetime, has never been as critically important as it is now, because we've not only seen our very history being attempted to be changed and whitewashed before our very eyes, and it's actually happened, right? But we also understand that there's been an attack on educators, and we already know that half of all public school teachers don't even make it to the end of their 5th year as a teacher. And so I say that because as a history teacher who spends hours lesson planning and finding out the right video clip and the right primary source to try and create that aha moment in my classroom, you know, there are people I've come to call heroes and idols. And most of those people are people who often lived in poverty or under the threat of racial violence. And one of those is a woman that you've heard of and that you know and many of you grew up with and grew up appreciating, Fannie Lou Hamer. And Fannie Lou Hamer was famous for saying, there's one thing you have to know about our movement. You know, and here we are. This is a movement we're in. This is a movement, right? One thing you have to know about our movement is a meeting of 3 people is better than no people. And I'll see a lot of nods when I see a lot of people who've been involved in those kind of ventures where you were so dedicated and committed and it was just think big, start small, but you never wavered in your commitment. And so in that time, we've made a commitment to ensure that we embody the principles and the values that we really believe not only that this country was founded on, but my favorite author, my favorite book, James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, you know, he says, we have to make America what it must become. And so our history is really important to us as an indivisible group. Carol?
In 2017, when Donald Trump won the presidency for the first time, and I know you can remember what that felt like, just for a moment. 2 congressional aides decided to get together to take action. And they sat down and wrote a guide that anyone across the nation could use. They didn't get specific and write an agenda, because nowhere across the nation do people do things exactly the same way. And they called it the Indivisible Guide for Action, because they knew that for decades, people like us had not been doing their part for what we call participatory democracy. And that means more than just going to the voting booth and voting. That means going to school board meetings and speaking your mind. That means organizing rallies, speaking your mind at rallies, really talking about what matters, taking action in any way, shape, or form you can. Power of the people. And within a year, over 5,000 indivisible groups were formed across the nation. One of those groups was called Indivisible Safety Harbor, which really for a while it was held in the living rooms of different members, sometimes at our house. That's true. And it eventually evolved into what you see in this room, called Indivisible North Pinellas.
And here we are.
And here we are.
And yes, thank you. And so as we welcome Mr. Jolly tonight, you know, let's reflect that, you know, close to a month ago, No Kings 2, significantly bigger turnout than No Kings 1, which means our movement is growing. It's growing, and we understand the work of Erica Chenoweth, and we could speak for hours about how she essentially said that one of the most important things is to reach people who are, quote, ambivalent. They're on the sidelines. They're just as concerned as we are. They might be feeling disheartened or disillusioned or experiencing despair, but when they see someone like us standing up, it not only validates their concerns, but they are more likely to take that first step. And think about it. How many times have you been to one of our meetings and we asked, raise your hand if it's your first time, and you raise your hand? Or we're at the rallies finding out first-time people. Do you have any idea how that feels, how good that feels? That's where we are, my friends. Let's think about this momentum and this energy that we have, and remember always that it's built on the fundamental values of kindness and decency and empathy and coming together to engage in dialogue and discourse and consensus. We can't fail on that foundation. So with that said, let's welcome David Jolly. Thank you, sir. You fucking nailed it.
Give me your mic.
You want this mic or the other?
Hey, thank you all very much. I do need a mic tonight because I'm losing my voice a little bit. Thank you for being a part of this, Indivisible North Pinellas. Thank you for what you're doing every day. And if tonight is your first introduction to Brant Robinson, I promise you, you're in the presence of a rock star. Brant, thank you for what you're doing. Literally, listen, I also just want to have a personal moment here. It is always so good to be home in Pinellas County. It is nourishing to myself. I'm living on the road most of these days, as you can understand. It's also nourishing always to be, for me personally, in a house of worship. I'm going to talk about faith a little bit tonight because I talk about it on the trail, probably in ways you haven't heard a politician talk about it in the past. But it is nourishing to be in a house of worship that recognizes that everybody should be welcome. Everybody should be extended love, regardless of the God you worship, the color of your skin, where you were born, who you love. That is the fundamental teaching, not just of this faith, but of all faiths. And it's also the fundamental teachings of Thomas Jefferson, who defended the natural rights of man. And it is wonderful to be in a community that celebrates that. So thank you for being a part of this evening. I mentioned I'm losing my voice. Some of you all, because this is home, some of you all have heard what I'm about to say tonight. I apologize, I'm going to say it again. But if I really lose my voice, any one of you could jump up and grab the microphone and finish for me. I just dropped my wife and our 2 kids at the airport. They're heading to Pennsylvania. On Sunday, I'll drive the dog and cat, and we'll get up there about 20 hours later. I want to do a couple things tonight. I want to first introduce you a little bit more to myself. Secondly, I want to talk about the values of this campaign, the values I hope to emanate as a candidate, but frankly, the values that I think hold us all together. American values, Florida values, human values, however you want to describe them. Values, not policies. I want to talk to you about the values, because it's those values that have slipped away from us. In a moment of historic anxiety, when the nation sits on a precipice, wondering if we can get through the next election, when this state is now more divided than it's ever been in our lifetimes, there are fundamental values that can correct the course. And then the last thing I'm going to share with you tonight is how we win, because we're going to win next November. I promise you we're going to win next November. I promise you. I promise you we're going to win. And notice I say we, not me. We are going to win. All of us in this room and all of us across the state, we're going to win next November. We're going to win next November. So a little bit more of an introduction. As Brant said, I was born in Dunedin to a father who was pastoring at Calvary Baptist Church at the time when it was in downtown Clearwater. My parents came back off the mission field because my mom was pregnant with me. Otherwise, they would be living in Central America and living on the beach, I suppose. But we came back to Pinellas County, where my mother was 3rd or 4th generation Pinellas County. Her father worked for J.B. Hunt Construction and laid a lot of the roads that some of you all drove on 15, 20, 50 years ago, whatever it might be. We moved to Miami. I lived in South Florida for about 10 or 12 years. I then lived in Pasco, where I graduated from Pasco High, and then I lived in Pensacola. I've had the opportunity to live all over the state. I'm a 5th generation Floridian. Doesn't make me a lick better than somebody who moved here yesterday, but that's part of my introduction. My wife and I live over in kind of Largo, Bel Air Bluffs area today. We do have 2 young kids. Largo, Bel Air Bluffs in the house. We're standing in Pinellas Park. You know, I lived in Indian Shores for about 15 years, and Park Boulevard was kind of our community and our corridor. So it's always kind of special to come back here. I guess because we're home, I'll also mention this. I worked for someone who called Pinellas Park home. I spent 25 years with him, a man some of you knew by the name of Bill Young. Bill Young, someone who by the time he got into politics and the time he left didn't recognize the party that he was a part of. Certainly I don't either. So my wife and I have two kids. They're 6 and 4. 6 and 4. I'll save you the Google search. I'm 53. And they're 6 and 4, and every day is a Monday in our house. They are measuring the governor's race by the hotels, the hotel pools, and whether or not it has a lazy river in it. We obviously don't take our kids out to many of these events because of a lot of reasons, as you can imagine, about our politics and our security and everything else. But we've taken them to a few. The very first event we took our kids to was in the Villages. The Villages. Can you imagine 2 weeks before an election, a 6-year-old and 4-year-old rolling into the Villages with the second gentleman of the United States of America? I mean, these kids were getting a parade route, and they were celebrated, the whole thing. We came home, our young son Teddy's still marching around the backyard saying, "We're not going back." Last thing I'll tell you about my introduction. This is where I introduce faith into the conversation tonight for a very specific reason. Please stick with me. I am a person of deep Christian faith. I'm a minister's kid. My wife and I still today celebrate our Christian faith. We're raising our kids in a Christian household. That's our decision. That's our faith. We celebrate it. But I mention it for a couple reasons. First, not to evangelize. That's not my role as a candidate for governor, and certainly not my role as governor. Second, because in a home where 8 years ago, culture wars were launched, embedded in the teachings, I believe wrongly, of faith, I think it's time that this state have a governor who understands the personal and private faith of a governor stops at the steps to the State House. That is what the Constitution has ordained. That is what the Constitution demands. But I will tell you, to people of any faith at all, it doesn't weaken our faith to leave it at the steps of the State House. It strengthens our faith. And I am unapologetic about that. So yes, I talk about my faith because it's just part of my introduction. I tell you where I lived, where I was born, I'm married, I have 2 kids, and yes, I celebrate my Christian faith, but it stops right there. It stops right there. But I do know that for me, rooted in that faith are certain values. And I know for others, whether it's a matter of faith or, as I mentioned, what Jefferson referred to as the natural rights of man, frankly, the dear friends of mine who identify as agnostic or atheists, who on most days are more charitable than people who sit in church pews, we all actually celebrate. I think we just got an amen over here. You know, by the way, faith in Florida is funny. You start in South Florida and you start with the Old Testament. You get up to North Florida, you're into the New Testament. I talk about it in Miami, I get some side eyes. I talk about it in the Panhandle, I get a lot of hallelujahs. But look, we all celebrate basic values that we hold together. At least we should. And it's those values that have slipped away from us. I mention our kids because let me tell you about the lived experience from my wife and I. I'm deeply committed to this state. I love this state. There's a dreamlike quality to this state. As I mentioned, 5 generations. I've lived all over this state. We're raising our kids in this state. But my wife and I ask ourselves every single day, should we raise our children in this state? That's real. That is our lived experience. Some of you with kids and grandkids, you know that, but you don't have to have kids and grandkids to be wondering yourself as well. Is Florida the place that you should call home? Is Florida the place that you encourage your neighbors, your longtime friends to call home or to even visit? Is Florida the place where your kids and grandkids should be raised? My wife and I ask ourselves that every single day. There's a dissidence running for governor, knowing in this environment, knowing in this cycle that we can actually win the governorship and change the direction, but every single day asking ourselves, should we raise our kids here? And why is that? We are a state that is gripped by 2 major crises right now, tonight as we sit here. First, there's an affordability crisis that is hitting everybody across this state. every walk of life, every income bracket, every region, from Pensacola to Miami, from Nocatee to Naples to Pinellas Park and everywhere in between. There's an affordability crisis that is impacting our ability to live out our lives in the state of Florida. For most, it's defined by access to secure housing, the ability to stay in your home, the ability to pay your rent. For others, it's access to health care. For some, it's access to food. Just down the road, an hour and a half ago, I drove by a church and there were hundreds of cars in a food line. Food lines are real. Right now. Right now. We have an affordability crisis in the state of Florida. What's the second crisis? The second crisis is we are a state that is exhausted by culture wars. Exhausted by culture wars. And what my friends on the other side of the aisle in Tallahassee have always failed to realize is that culture wars have victims. Culture wars have victims. When you marginalize communities, when you promote other communities, you are creating victims of culture wars in the state. As is a moral wrong, but it's also a constitutional wrong. So yes, for my wife and I, we wonder, is Florida the home where we should invest in the economy? Will it be affordable for our kids? Will it create opportunity for our kids? What it takes to continue to live in Florida will take me away from having time with my kids. Is it an investment worth investing in? And yes, do we want to raise our children in a state where based on who you love, how you look, who you worship, you have a different fate in life in the Sunshine State? Those are the crises we face. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? There are three values, as I mentioned. There are basic values that I think tether all of us together. I'm going to talk a little bit to Democrats tonight, but I'm going to talk to independents and Republicans as well. And for those of you here tonight who are not registered Democrats, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this audience tonight. Thank you for being a part of this conversation tonight. Thank you. Because I got something to share with you. I've been a Republican. I represented this area as a Republican in Congress. I apologize for that. I'm sorry. I've been an independent for 5 or 6 years, and today I'm a proud Florida Democrat. But what that means is that whatever your voter registration says tonight in your wallet or your purse, we have something in common. We have something in common. Listen, I'm going to talk to Democrats tonight, but I'm talking to independents and Republicans as well, because the values I'm about to talk about have nothing to do with party. I do believe they are values that are deeply rooted in Democratic Party traditions, which is why I finally found a political home that I get to celebrate. That's my decision, but these values are so much bigger than our party. So what are those values? I'm going to talk briefly about those values, and we'll talk a little bit about policies. I'm going to tell you how we're going to win. So, those values. The very first one is simple. The economy should work for everybody. Absolutely everybody. The economy should work for everybody. Now listen, I would say to my fellow Democrats, we don't need to condemn success. Let's welcome success. Let's congratulate success, but let's move on and work on the fact that this economy is leaving too many people behind. It's leaving too many people behind. For the homeowner who's wondering if they can stay in their home because of the cost of insurance or taxes, the first-time home buyer who can never enter home ownership because it's out of reach, the renter today who is having to chase rents, having to move regularly because their rent keeps going up and they don't know where they're going to live next, the family who can't afford health care. Right now, they're looking at health care plans saying, I don't think I can achieve that. They're living in a state that has failed to expand Medicaid. They can't afford health care. Frankly, an education system where we have so defunded public education and we've created a choice program for the haves and have-nots, where the voucher doesn't cover your tuition so you can't afford to go to a choice school and your public school's been defunded. The economy's not working for everybody. It's not. I sat with somebody in Miami who said, oh, it's wonderful. All right, my kids can't wait to move back here. They've got finance jobs and this and that and all that other stuff. That's not real life in Florida. That's real life in some pockets. That's real life in some pockets. Look, I've had a wonderful life, a preacher's kid who was able to become an attorney, work in politics, be elected to Congress. But right now, tonight, my wife and I are trying to figure out how do we afford next year's health care plan for our family. We're trying to figure out where do we send our kids to school in a system where public education has been absolutely obliterated with no funding at all, abandoning teachers who are doing nothing more than trying to care for and educate our kids, and we have a choice program that's not working. We're wondering, should we stay in our home given the price of insurance? And listen, we're fortunate, we're blessed. By many definitions, we're privileged. There's a whole swath of this state that's being left behind because the economy is not working for everybody. It's a value that we should fight for. The economy should work for everybody. The second value is that the government actually has a responsibility in our lives. It's our government. We pay for it. It should be lean and it should be efficient. But there are certain things in people's lives that only government, our government, that we collectively resource through our taxes is in a place to actually impact. Access to health care, access to excellence in education, investments in roads, investments in clean air and clean water. In an era of DOGE, when Republicans are trying to strip government, they fail to realize it's not an attack on government, it's an attack on people. It's an attack on people. When we reduce access to health care, we reduce health care outcomes. We jeopardize people's lives. When we reduce access to quality education, we are leaving generations behind. When we fail to invest in transportation, we leave people unable to get to work. There are so many areas where government does have a responsibility in our life. It should be lean and efficient. It shouldn't be bloated. But much like Bill Clinton did in 1992, we need to recognize that for so many families and so many people, the government has the opportunity to create personal opportunities for people. The third value, it's very simple and it's heartbreaking that we live in an era and a time when this seems controversial. But we must be a state and we must be a country. And one of the reasons I'm excited to be a Florida Democrat is because I know we have a party where absolutely everybody is welcomed and empowered and lifted up and celebrated, regardless of the color of your skin, where you were born, who you love, or who you worship. That's a value. That's a value. That's a value. Nothing I just said makes me a Democrat. It makes me somebody who wants to lead with heart to try to fix this state. Yes, I think we can organize within the Democratic Party to lead a new and emerging political coalition built around those values. That's why I'm in this race, and I believe we can win this race through those shared values. Because listen, one of the things I do love about being a Democrat is we get to accept math and science and data and public health and vaccines and everything else that is... everything else that's contributed to human progress. But folks, math is math. Math is math. There are not enough registered Democratic voters in the state of Florida to elect a Democratic governor by ourselves. There are not, and we don't get to wish it away, and if we ignore it, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. I know that's some tough talk. I realize it is. We're going to work really hard to register more Democrats. The Democratic Party, locally, caucuses, state party works very hard every day to register more Democrats. Thank you for that. We need to do that. We need to close the gap. But right now, tonight, there's 1,000,004 more registered Republicans than registered Democrats. We're not going to close that gap. But guess what? We don't need to. We don't need to. We need to convince independents and Republicans to vote for Democrats. That's what we need to do. And when we win hearts and minds and when we win elections, registration gets a whole lot easier. So why do I talk about those values? I talk about those values because I believe within the Democratic Party, for those of you who are card-carrying Democrats, maybe you've been for 5 decades. I've been for 5 months. You're welcome. I believe those values can tether together the young, emerging progressive, or the last Vietnam protester sitting in this room tonight, with the last blue dog standing in Pinellas Park or Pensacola. Those values are our Democratic Party values, that the economy should work for everybody. The government has an opportunity to impact people's lives, and we should be a place where everybody's welcomed and celebrated. Those are our Democratic Party values, but they're so much bigger than our values. Tonight, if you're an independent or a Republican and you hear those values, I dare you to disagree with me. And you know you can't. And I don't want you to. Let's build a bridge around those values. And when we talk about how we win tonight, I'm going to bring this to a close by telling you it's already working. We're already building that new coalition. We're building that coalition around these values in a time when the country and the state has gotten away from them. And that is presenting the opportunity for us. So a couple quick things on policies. I'm not going to give a big policy speech. I'd put everybody to sleep. But I am going to hit on a couple things because guess what? We're also in an era where we're sick and tired of politicians who make promises and don't know what they're talking about and they never follow through. I've been out of politics for 10 years and I learned how to tell the truth. I talk about things that politicians shouldn't talk about. I talk about revenue. I talk about guns. I talk about marriage equality and all these other things that people get skittish about. I don't care. I don't care. Because if we're going to finally turn this state around, we're going to talk openly and honestly about our problems and about our solutions. How do we get the economy to work for everybody? I think the property insurance market in Florida has collapsed and it's not coming back. That's the bottom line. My Republican friends in Tallahassee, their insurance policy is held together by Band-Aids and popsicle sticks. They let undercapitalized insurance firms come into the state, deny 50% of the claims. They have a bailout fund for insurance firms, but not for homeowners. They allow insurance companies to send their profits out of state, but keep their losses here, and they call that homeowners insurance. And for that, it costs you 3 times what it used to cost 5 years ago. The market has collapsed, and it's not coming back. I think we need a state catastrophic fund to remove hurricane coverage from the private market. If we do that, we could cut homeowners insurance by 60 or 70%. 60 or 70%. Now look, I'm not telling you we can do that on day one. If politicians could do things on day one, the Ukraine war would be over. But we can begin funding a state catastrophic fund. It might take 2 or 3 years, but once we've funded it, we're able to remove hurricane coverage from the private market altogether. I do think that we need generational property tax relief. Now, I think what we're hearing out of Tallahassee ultimately isn't going to make sense. We'll see. Here's what I'd say to my friends of all parties, all stripes. Let's see what they put forward. We don't need to light our hair on fire yet and oppose it. Let's see what they ultimately put forward. I just know I've been a Republican, and Republican math never works. It never works. I remember Speaker Boehner telling me, don't worry, it'll all work out in the next 20 or 30 years. No, it doesn't. It never does. I'm not sure that a repeal of property taxes is actually going to mathematically make sense. I think it's going to defund police and defund education and defund roads and clean air and clean water and sewers. But let's see what Republicans put forward. But instead of just opposing it, let's put our plan forward. Look, I think we need generational property tax relief for first-time home buyers. Many of us in this room benefit from Save Our Homes and portability because in the 2000s we faced a similar crisis that we're facing right now. Homeowners insurance and taxes. And guess what? Longtime homeowners in the 2000s couldn't stay in their home because of the increase in values. So Republicans came up with Save Our Homes and portability. They used public policy to impact people's economy. Today they'd call it socialism. I'm glad they didn't back then. But listen, first-time home buyers have the inverted problem. Now the first-time home buyer gets hit by a tax bill that jumps by 300 or 400% the second year they're in that home because all of those exemptions have gone away. So how about a first-time home buyer exemption of $150,000, $200,000? How about a 3, 4, 5 year step up in basis? What if we consider an across-the-board homestead exemption for homesteaders of $200,000, $250,000? It disproportionately improves the lot of those who make the least and own the least valuable properties, but it provides relief to everybody. That's within reach. We should be talking about our own policies. There's a way to address the affordability crisis for homeowners, but what about for renters? I can give you one way to do it. Get Tallahassee out of local control. Get Tallahassee out of local control. Tallahassee should provide direct resources for more municipalities to tackle the rent crisis in their communities, not to tell local communities how to do it. Local communities know best how to pursue affordable and workforce housing agreements, sometimes over 30 or 40 years with developers that apply to people of certain income or certain trades or certain walks of life. Good, let's do more of it. Let's do more of it. But the way we do it is we trust local municipalities to determine how best to control rents in their community and get Tallahassee out of the decision making. We can reduce the cost of utilities for every ratepayer across the state. In a state that just approved the largest ratepayer increase in the history of the country this week, we can actually reduce utility rates across the state for every ratepayer, homeowner, and renter if we actually do one thing. Acknowledge that climate change and climate science is real. If we begin to invest in clean and renewable energies, it not just provides for stewardship of the environment, but it drives down costs for Florida's utility payers. And frankly, one of the ways we do that is we have to disrupt the most corrupt campaign finance system in the entire country, which exists right here in the state of Florida. We let the special interests make public policy, and they send millions of dollars to politicians who misuse it for their own interest. If we were to appoint new commissioners to the Public Service Commission, if we accept that climate science and climate change is real and we bring in clean and renewable energies, we're going to reduce costs for every ratepayer. We can do that. We can make additional investments in public and multimodal transportation right now. We can do that. Listen, everything I just mentioned is a policy that's available to Republican leaders in Tallahassee, but they refuse to do it. They refuse to do it. This election is about change versus more of the same. If you want more of the same, they're going to be offering it to you. If you want change, we've got policy solutions that impact people's lives every single day. Not fighting culture wars, but fighting for people's personal economies. We can do that. Second value I mentioned is that the government has a responsibility in our lives. I'm going to talk about a couple places where that's important tonight. First, we're going to talk about education. We're going to talk about education. We need, in the state of Florida, a 10-year renaissance in public education. In public education. We have abandoned public education for the last 20 to 30 years in the state of Florida. Our teachers tonight in the state of Florida are paid dead last in the nation. It is a moral wrong. It is a moral wrong. I don't care your voter registration. The third largest state pays our teachers dead last in the nation. That is a moral wrong. We should all be ashamed, and Republican leaders in Tallahassee should be ashamed every day about that. We have failing infrastructure in our public school system. Some schools are fantastic. Listen, there are some real bright spots in public education in the state of Florida, but we have too many failing properties that we're giving away to for-profit charter schools right now. We have failing properties that need an investment, a cash infusion. We need a 10-year renaissance in public education. I think we should consider how we spend our tourist development tax dollars here in the state of Florida. Because we have plenty of tourist money coming in every single day, and you know how we have to spend it by law? On more tourism. Now listen, that makes a little bit of sense. It is intuitive. I represented Pinellas County in Congress. Nobody is going to crimp the tourist industry. It is a main economic driver of this state. Construction, agriculture, and tourism. But guess what? We don't need to be spending our tourist money on advertising Allegiant Airlines and the beaches on the Chicago L in January. We need to be spending it here in Florida to invest in public education. We don't have a crisis of convention centers in the state of Florida. We have a crisis in public education. So what do? I think we need a 10-year renaissance in public education. Pay teachers 30% more, not 3% more, 30% more. Invest in failing infrastructure right now in this county and across the state. There are 80-year-old facilities with trailers and portables in the back with leaky window air conditions. The playground is a dusty field under an oak tree. Florida's families are not going to rush into that environment when our voucher and choice program is funding new construction schools with ballistic glass and security officers and small classrooms and fancy football fields. We're a consumer society. Where do you think families are going to send their kids? We don't have school choice in Florida. We got a false choice. So let's give parents and families a real choice. Let's have a renaissance in public education. And then here's what I say about the school choice program. This sounds a little different than Democrats in past cycles. I acknowledge that, but stick with me. School choice is very popular. I don't think we need to fight choice. I don't. But here's what I know we need to do. We need to fight for Florida's kids and Florida's families. What does that look like? If you don't have kids or grandkids right now in the school system, I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound crazy. It's going to sound crazy. A choice school in the state of Florida receiving vouchers tonight does not have to teach your kid to read. It does not have to teach your kid to read. That's not hyperbole. That's a real life story. A first grade kid who can't read, the choice school gets to kick him out. Kick him out. Take the $8,500, send the kid back to public school. Send the kid back to public school. That's what they're doing. Look, I know we got trackers in the room, so I'm going to talk about this a lot more tonight. I hope it all gets recorded. Our choice schools in Florida don't have to teach your kid to read. They're stealing taxpayer dollars and they're not educating your kid. If your kid has a disability, is on the spectrum, they don't have to accept your kid. If your child wants to pursue academic excellence, trigonometry in 10th grade, they don't have to provide it. Pursue the arts or the trades, they don't have to provide it. It is our money going to those schools, and it's leaving a generation of kids behind. And here's the most shameful part about it. Here's the most shameful part about it. Nothing about this is helping families in needs like Jeb Bush suggested 25 years ago it would, because these voucher schools get to charge families a tuition on top of the voucher, so those in most economic need never have access to the choice schools. We are leaving a generation of kids behind. So what do we do about it? We don't have to shut down choice. We need a renaissance in public education, and then we need standards that say if you are a school that's going to participate in the choice program, you're going to provide the same offerings and services and academics that our public schools do. And if you do that, then welcome to being an education partner to Florida's families. But oh, by the way, you don't get to charge them tuition on top of your voucher. You got to do it for the same cost that our public schools do. If you do that, welcome to the new Florida Choice program. I'm just not confident too many of them will be able to meet those standards. It's another area where government has a responsibility and a role in our lives. We should be a state, we should be a party that understands we need to be tough on crime. But tough on crime to a Democratic-led state should look differently than what it is right now in the state of Florida. One, because as Democrats, we understand the racial disparities in criminal justice that have existed for generations. We understand the disparate outcomes based on someone's walk of life, their income, their economy, or the color of their skin. That's real. That's real, and it has to be addressed. Tough on crime does not just mean throwing people in jail. It means the fair adjudication of everybody's rights. That's what it means. It also means that at times we should spend money to invest in diversion and opportunity programs that keep young people out of a life of crime. But yes, it does mean when somebody commits a crime in the state of Florida, they should be held accountable. Listen, this governor for too long has conflated immigration with crime. It's a moral wrong what he's doing, but it's a statistical wrong as well. There is a higher propensity of violent and property crimes in native-born American communities than in our immigrant communities. That's the truth right now tonight. But if you listen to this governor, you're being led to believe that somehow the greatest criminal threat we face in this state is the man that for 15 years has been showing up at the job site every day to earn a day's wage, to put food on the table for his kids, to have their part of the American dream, to learn English. That person is not a criminal. That person needs a pathway to work in this state. But yes, if somebody creates or commits a violent or property crime, if somebody commits corruption in the state of Florida, we need to be a state that holds them accountable. So what does that look like? What does that mean? That means if you were born here, it means if you immigrated here from Cuba or Haiti or Pennsylvania or Ohio or New York or Connecticut, or if you're a Tallahassee politician who steals $10 million from the Medicaid program for Hope Florida, if you break the law in Florida, you should be sent in front of a grand jury and indicted for that corruption. That's what it means in the state of Florida. Part of talking about safe communities, the last thing I'll tell you, last example I'll use here where government has a role in our lives, and I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about something that every political consultant in Florida says never talk about this. I don't care, we're going to talk about it, and to the trackers, focus in on this, because I'm not embarrassed by it. We're going to talk every single day about stopping the next school shooting in the state of Florida. We're going to do it. We're going to talk every single day about taking a firearm away from a domestic violent husband intending to use it against his wife. Because we don't do that right now in Florida. Under the leadership of Tallahassee Republicans, we don't do that. And I start by asking my Republican friends in Tallahassee, not all Republicans across this state, but Republican legislators, what are you willing to do to stop the next school shooting? Because I haven't heard anything in 30 years. The closest you got was the Parkland package, and now you're trying to undo it and roll it back. We don't need to go backwards. We need to go forwards. We got to stop the next school shooting in the state of Florida. We are a state desperately in need of universal and comprehensive background checks. More than 70% of this state wants them, and Republican leaders won't give it to us. We don't have that in Florida. We have criminal conviction checks. We have criminal conviction checks. If you're convicted of a crime, you pop in the database, and then it's held up. But guess what? For that domestic violence situation where a police officer shows up, but the victim won't provide a victim statement for understandable reasons, where charges, it's determined, cannot be brought because there's not a cooperating witness. It happens again, a second time, a third time. The police show up to the house. The fourth time, that husband goes to Walmart and buys a gun on demand. Buys a gun on demand and goes home and uses it to commit violence against their spouse. I promise you, as a governor, I am never going to take a firearm away from a law-abiding citizen, but I am going to take it away from the domestic violence perpetrator who intends to use it on his wife. Every mass shooting, every school shooting has a failure of public policy, and it presents itself, and it's obvious, and it's clear. In the Pulse nightclub, someone who was not allowed to board a plane was allowed to buy an assault weapon and use it to kill 50 people, celebrating their life and their love in a nightclub in Orlando. In Las Vegas, somebody used a weapon with a bump stock they shouldn't have had to commit a crime against 500 people. Every school shooting is a result of public policy, most often because of access to a weapon that should have been stored and protected from that child. We're not arresting parents and holding them accountable, but we should be. We should be. We need universal and comprehensive background checks, and yes, I think we should ask the question, if state voters put it on the ballot, would you support licensing and training for anybody in this state before they can handle a weapon? I think we should. I think we should. I was doing a tour of the Seminole County school system about a month ago, and we were in a elementary school, a beautiful new elementary school, and after 5 or 6 classrooms, I noticed a similar pattern in all the carpets, and it kind of stuck out to me. I wasn't sure if it was school colors or why they did it. Every single classroom had the same pattern, and so I asked the principal, why is it that there's always gray carpet, but there's this little sliver of blue carpet in every classroom? And she said it's so that when the shots rain out, the kids know where to run. They run to the blue carpet. We don't need more blue carpet in the state of Florida. We need gun violence prevention legislation in the state of Florida. That is what we need. So yes, we're going to talk about stopping the next school shooting, and I don't care what the political ramifications are of it. I know what they are. People are going to support gun violence prevention legislation in the state of Florida. So look, the last thing I'll share with you is, how do we win? How do we win? I want to point out a couple things about how we win this cycle. I've been a TV analyst for 8 years. I've been in politics for about 30 years. I've probably run 30 campaigns. I've been a candidate in 6. There's this notion out there, by the way, I love this. It happens every time I'm on the ballot. David Jolly's not going to raise enough money. Yeah, David Jolly's a reformer. I'm a reformer who thinks we need to take on the deep-pocketed interest in this state. That's true. But I want to set the record straight on something. I've never lost a race because we didn't have money. I lost one because of redistricting. This race isn't going to be about money. When we build a movement strong enough for change, no amount of money is going to be able to stop us. So one thing we have to do is build a movement. What does that look like? As a candidate, here is my pledge to you and my ask for your help. I will leave it all on the field. Tonight is our 124th community event since I got into this race. 124. I'm doing what Lawton Childs did in 1970. I'm just driving, not walking. But we have Vito Shealy on our team. If you haven't met him, we just did 2 town halls on the Alabama border in Milton and Molino. A little town, 91% Republican registration, 500 people. We turned out 60 people there. That means we had Republicans and independents show up on the Alabama border. We've been in Monroe County and Miami-Dade and Broward and Naples and Nocatee, Zephyr Hills, Pinellas Park, and everywhere in between. I promise you I will do my part to leave it all on the field. We will take this message into every room, and it doesn't change based on which part of the state we're in. It's exactly the same words because it reflects the values that we all share and we know will return us to greatness. Second thing I'm going to ask you, where I fall short. One of the ways we win is I'm going to ask you to help me where I'm insufficient, where I fall short, where the values are insufficient. Help me, make me smarter, make me stronger, be a part of the team. Lead with me shoulder to shoulder. As Democrats, we likely have a primary. We'll see how it all sorts itself out. But let's remember that as Democrats, we share the values that we need to lead with. We don't need to fight each other over our values. We're in agreement over our values. The contrast we're trying to draw is with our Republican nominees on the other side of the aisle. So where I'm insufficient, make me stronger, be a part of this campaign. Something else, part of how we win. Notice in the last 20 minutes, not once, have I mentioned the President of the United States. Now listen, some of you are saying hallelujah. Some of you are saying, why not? I'm not asking anyone to lay down their convictions about this president or the fate of the country. I worry every night about whether we will survive to the next election. I left Congress and left my party over the direction that this president has taken us, and for 8 years I have gone on TV and blabbed my big mouth telling you everything I think about this president. But this race is not about the President of the United States. We have a U.S. Senate race. We have a congressional race where we get to litigate the future and the direction of the country. This race is about the future of Florida. This race is about what Bob Graham and Lawton Chiles referred to as the basic responsible administration of government. Are we educating your kids? Are we creating a place where you can go to work and have a job? Are we providing for your safe communities? Are we protecting your freedoms and your liberties? That's what this race is about. Now, as Democrats, I will tell you, when we win races like this, we begin to change the direction of the nation. But this race isn't about the president. This race is about you. This race is about us. This race is about the state of Florida. So here's the good news. If we, in this moment, build a coalition where each one of us do what's within reach, this is the best shot we've had in 30 years. The best shot we've had in 30 years in the state of Florida to choose a new direction. And I want to share with you, I'm gonna close with a story, and then we'll go to questions. But I mentioned my kids, our two kids who are 6 and 4. I'm still amazed, by the way, that 2 kids can come from the same womb and be so radically different. Our 6-year-old daughter, Cece, is going to be just fine in life. We're going to set up the guardrails. She's going to ping pong off them, and boom, she's gone and not looking back. And that's probably next year in 3rd grade. Our little son Teddy's already told my wife he's never leaving the house. I believe him, and she thinks that's a good decision. So I'm reading to our daughter one night. As I mentioned, we've kept the politics from them. We don't like to introduce them to too much of these politics. But I'm reading, as I do at nights that I'm home, I'm reading to my daughter. And you know, bedtime reading is an interesting thing. She unpacks everything that's in her head and her heart. It can be about the playground politics of the day, the anxiety over the spelling test, the stub toe, whatever it is. It just starts coming out. It's one of the most precious and remarkable and authentic moments of the entire day, and I'll never forget these moments I have with her. But this one night I'm reading, and she starts crying, and she says, "Dad, I don't want you to run for governor." It was real, folks. It was real. "I don't want you to run for governor." And she meant it. And she meant it. 2 things happened in that moment for me. First, I realized the raw, searing indictment of what it meant about us as a state and as a country. The state of our politics, that a 6-year-old child looks at politics and sees it as so terrible and toxic and divisive that she doesn't want anything to do with it. And she's telling her dad, "Dad, please don't do this." When I was 6, I was looking up at the Reagan-Carter presidential election. I didn't know what to think about it. I didn't know what they stood for, but I looked at it aspirationally. I thought it was a remarkable part of our American experiment, something to be celebrated. I wondered as a kid, what are my parents going to do? What are my teachers going to do? What does this mean for the country? But I looked at it aspirationally. And here's a 6-year-old child saying, "Please don't do this, Dad." That is an indictment of where we are. I wish I could tell you that one election and one candidate could fix all of that ails us right now, all that divides us. I'm not sure that's the case. But I do know that one election cycle can move us back towards a new direction. that one election cycle can introduce a new coalition into American politics. What Indivisible North Pinellas is all about is trying to create a movement where we all have these shared values that we are fighting for because it represents who we are and who we should be. I do know that one election can help contribute to that new direction. The second thing that happened in that moment, and for me it was providence, I believe. The words that came to me as I said, sweetheart, when you have a chance to change the world, you take it. You take it. You don't know what's been ordained. You don't know how it turns out. But in this moment of great division, where the country and the state are hanging in a precipice, where we each know we have to do something in this moment when we have a chance to change the world, it's the calling upon all of us to do our part to change the world. And so yes, the message that I left with her that night is, sweetheart, your dad and your mom, this family, the sacrifice you're making as a 6-year-old, whether you realize it or not, we are doing our part in this moment to try to change the world. And what I'll tell you is when we each do what is within reach for us, we see remarkable results. See, everybody in this room is here tonight for a specific reason, because you're doing what's within reach. Those who participated in No Kings, you did your part. Those who have called your local member of Congress, you did your part. Those who are donating to candidates right now, you're doing your part. Those who are considering running for Congress, running for the State House, running for the school board, you're doing your part right now. And here's the most incredible thing. In this state, when we do that, it's already working. It's already working. Earlier this year, this spring, we had 2 congressional special elections. Those Democratic candidates outperformed Democrats from just last November by 15 and 16 points. Not because more people in Florida are registering as Democrats. They're not. But because Democrats turned out and more independents and Republicans decided to vote for a Democrat for the first time. That is what's happening. In Orlando, we had 2 state legislative districts late in the spring, early into the summer, that swung towards Democratic candidates by 15 and 21 points. In Miami, on December 9th, an 8-year Republican incumbent mayor is going to be replaced by a Democratic mayor in the city of Miami. Why? Why? Because in this moment of great division, of great anxiety, we are all stepping up and we are all doing our part. It looks different for everybody. For some, it's participating in a rally. For others, it's making sure you're registered to vote. For some, it's checking your vote by mail. For my wife and I, it's deciding to run for governor. But here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen next November. I promise you this. I promise you this. All of the networks in New York, next November on election night, the story is not going to be that David Jolly just got elected governor of Florida. Yeah, that will be true, but that's not the story. I promise you this. The story is going to be that Florida's voters for the first time in nearly 30 years have chosen a new direction. The story is going to be that Florida's Democratic Party, that Florida's Democratic voters have led a new and emerging political coalition in the United States that has not been seen in a generation. That Florida's Democrats led with 3 fundamental values: that the economy should work for absolutely everybody, that the government can help people with their health care and their education, fight for the environment and fight for constitutional rights, and that the Democratic value that everybody should have their rights protected and their dignity restored, that those values became big enough in a deep red state of Florida, in a state that is home to the President of the United States, a state where our governor has had a tighter grip on Republican politics than anybody we've seen in 50 years. In that state, Florida's voters just demanded change. That is going to be the story next year. And when that happens, guess what? You get to say to your neighbor, and you get to say to your kids, and you get to say to your grandkids, you get to look yourself in the mirror, and I get to say to my little girl, sweetheart, we just changed the world. Be a part of it. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take just a second for us to get settled again. I am so pumped. I am so inspired. Is there like a rally happening anywhere soon? I mean, So I just want to, again, I want to make sure that I also recognize all of you. We're here so that we can make sure that we give you, our fellow citizens, the opportunity to ask the kind of questions that are only going to make it more likely that David Jolly is going to be our next governor. We really appreciate you guys being here tonight. So with that said.
I just have to say something. Did this guy just bring the thunder or what?
All right, we're going to take some questions from Mr. Jolly. So why don't you guys shake your hand? Yeah, or shake your hand. Raise your hand.
Congressman Jolly, Army retired colonel, how are you going to get the military and the veterans of Florida on your side? And also, in 2018, Andrew Gillum only lost by 34,000 votes out of 8 million votes. How are you going to get those individuals? And last question, if you look around here, it's mostly middle-aged, agers like myself. Where's the Mondani effect?
Yeah.
As you can see, Mondani talked to Trump today, and you'll notice the demeanor of Donald Trump was so different.
Yeah.
He knows what's to be and what's to come. What do you say about these comments?
You know what I find fascinating about the president is his ability to step on his own party's messaging. I think he left the meeting and said this New York mayor is going to do a great job. Republicans have already invested millions of dollars trying to tie me to the New York mayor, and the president just said, I think he's going to do a great job. Listen, let's hit on a couple things. For veterans, thank you for your service. For those of you who may have been a part of our political coalition in Congress, I promise you, one, I was on the Military Construction Committee, on the VA committee, and I led in a lot of very specific areas, not because I have past service, but because I surrounded myself by people who had served. Part of the job of a leader is not to do what this governor sometimes does, which is to think they have all the answers. It's to actually bring people into leadership who do. And so one of the things I'm doing in this campaign, we've done it with the veterans community, we've done it with the Gen Z, we're doing it with the college kids. We are already organizing, we have regular meetings, and I am trying to turn the campaign over to them. I'll give you an example when it comes to young people. Well, let's stick on veterans for one thing, because there's one thing that I think we have to think about in an era of Doge as the state of Florida. Because of the cuts coming from Washington, I do wonder if in the state of Florida and other states as well, we are going to have to begin to spend state resources on activities and services that had previously been covered by federal money. What do I mean by that? Think about the Social Security Administration, but you can think about the Veteran Benefits Administration, you can think about VHA, you can think about other places. We may be in a state where we now have to provide state services, provide state navigators to our veterans community to be able to access federal benefits. We may have to set up state-funded Social Security offices simply to help people navigate the Social Security Administration. My mom is 84. If she has a Social Security question, she's not getting online. She's going to drive to her local office. But guess what? That local office is closed now. So we may have to be a state that begins to spend specific state resources on veteran services in areas we haven't. Here's another example. For, I believe, mental health counseling, mental health services, there can be a delay of 5 to 6 months before a veteran can be seen. And that 5 to 6 months, that veteran could take their life. We have to be a state that recognizes and says, how are we going to fill this gap with state services? This is what I'm talking about in an era of Doge when the federal government is saying, we're just going to slash funding for everything. They're not fighting government and attacking government, they're attacking people. So I do think we're going to have to enter into this era in Florida where we realize how do we start to spend money in ways we haven't had to before. Look, as I mentioned, part of what we're doing is turning this campaign over to different leadership groups, whether it is climate leaders, whether it is economic development leaders, higher education leaders. We just formed a committee to help reimagine and reshape, ready for this? The state university system of Florida. Because I want to bring in people who understand institutional autonomy and institutional excellence and get the DeSantis ideologues out of running our schools and universities. We're doing this in the area of public health as well. Actually, by next year, I want people to look up at the Jolly campaign and be able to see what the next Surgeon General could look like. Because guess what I get to do on day one? I get to fire the Surgeon General of the state of Florida. So I'll close with the last piece. What does that mean about young people? I am giving them the keys to the car to help drive it. Because look, you're exactly right. We look around this room, we don't have enough young people involved. We have started that process. We're involving people. Here's what I know. This is more process than substance. Actually, I guess it's substance than process. I'm not cool. I'm not. I'm a 53-year-old guy with a hoarse voice and salt and pepper hair who looks like a former Republican. I'm not cool. If you put me on TikTok, it makes me weird. So I'm not even asking young people to come into my digital world. I'm asking to go into theirs. So what does that mean? People who are on TikTok or Instagram or Threads, I'm asking them to open up their platform and once or twice a week have me come into their world. Have them lead the conversation. Maybe it's about sports or humor or politics. Maybe it's insulting me or kicking the tires. Whatever it is, if we can do that and live in the digital world of people who are otherwise disaffected by politics, we've got a shot at building that coalition you're talking about.
Good evening, Mr. Jolly. It's really good to see you again. I want to say I don't have one single question for you. I thank you for your courage. I thank you for taking on this role, and I understand what it means to be positioned for purpose. I thank you for starting out by telling us about your faith, and I understand the role of faith. The thing that troubles me most about what's happening in our country right now are the folk who say that they are faith walkers. They call themselves Christians. I no longer call myself a Christian. I am a woman of faith because they have so tarnished what it means to be a Christian. The commandment that supersedes all the others is to love thy neighbor as you love yourself, and hang all the other commandments on that. And what we see happening right now is just completely unbelievable. So all of that being said, you talked about some of those folk, for instance, the one who's taken, I think it was $10 million and is still up there in the Senate right now. I didn't say any names, I just said the number, okay? But anyway, the question is for all of us is, how did we let that happen? How did we send him back to a position of leadership and authority to represent us? How did we let that happen? And I don't mean just us individually. We all know other people that we associate with, that we sit down at the table with. We have to do everything we can to make certain that we do not allow these people to get back in these positions. So again, Mr. Jolly, thank you. I know your heart. I know a number of things that you've done, and I have nothing but love for you. I will do all I can to help you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. As we say, amen. Listen, we are in a church. We could have a sermon right now about the community of folks who consider themselves church hurt, who don't quite understand the marriage of church and politics over the last 20 years. It's not just a corruption of our politics, it's a corruption of our faith. And there's a reason that people are leaving the church, and I think you just identified it. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
Well, I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I can understand now how your voice is starting to fade. And thank you for that. My question is, it's related to the disaster relief fund that you spoke about. How does that get to be developed? What's your plan for that?
You mean the state catastrophic fund for insurance?
Thank you, that's it.
Oh, yeah. Who's ready to go to sleep? Because let me, look, I'm a bit of a wonk, a lot of a wonk. When I was in Congress, actually representing Pinellas County, I introduced a national catastrophic fund for the same reason. Listen, there is not an affordable way to cover natural disasters, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, wildfires in California, flooding in Texas, tornadoes in Tornado Alley. I want to be very specific with my language. There's a market-based way to do that. It's just gotten so expensive that it's pricing people out of their homes. I would always like to look, I say this as a former Republican, I say it as a current Democrat, I always like to look to the private sector first for a solution. I don't think we need to use government where there's an appropriate private sector solution. But where the private sector has failed to provide affordable insurance, I think the government needs to step in. So how does that look? We right now have a hurricane fund in the state of Florida that Republicans fund. They just funded it up to $8 billion, and they issued a press release. We now have $8 billion for it. Guess what they use it for? To bail out insurance companies. If we actually took that hurricane fund to 32 to 38 billion, that's a lot. It could take us 3 years to do that. But once we do it, it becomes the greatest insurance provider, the largest insurance provider in the country for natural disasters. We buy reinsurance on the world stage, which is what the private sector would do, and we invest our resources in out-of-state income-producing properties like toll roads and other infrastructure, which is what other funds do. And basically, we have created a fund to then permanently cover natural disasters in the state of Florida. So your homeowner's insurance policy, if you go to your agent tonight and you say, can you write me a policy? It's called X Wind. No wind insurance, no hurricane insurance. What would the price be? For us, it would drop by 70%. 70%. For a lot of homes, it would drop by 60 to 70%. The reason you can't do that is because your mortgage company requires you to cover all of the risks, including hurricanes. So the reason your private insurance would drop by 60 or 70% is because you no longer have to cover hurricanes because the state catastrophic fund would. How do we fund it? I mentioned I talk about revenue. We should talk about math. There are a lot of ways to do it. Right now in the state of Florida, insurance companies don't have to pay taxes on their profits. They get to ship their profits out of state and keep their losses here. If we did what's called combined reporting for Florida's corporations that send their profits out of state, we generate $3 billion a year. If you were to actually have a dock tax or a stamp tax on every real estate transaction, it occurs in your life about every 6.5 years. Let's say it's $250, $400, whatever that is. If that's every 6.5 years, but you're saving thousands every single year on your insurance, begins to make sense. Our tourist development tax dollars that I mentioned for education. What if we created or used some of that money to actually go to fund a state cat fund? Here's the interesting thing. Nobody, and I promise you, we're not gonna reduce tourism in the state of Florida. Maybe some of you would want to, but I promise you this. I promise you this. A $2 rental car tax or a $5 hotel night bed tax is not going to stop people from coming to Florida. You know what has already stopped them from coming? Feeling unwelcome and fearing gun violence. That's what's actually stopped them. And so, yes, maybe the way we fund public education, maybe the way we fund a state insurance fund includes a rental car tax or a bed tax. But guess what? You know what's going to keep people coming? I don't think often about election night next year. It's just not how my head works. We wake up every day having to do what we got to do that's right in front of us. But I've occasionally thought, driving through the middle of the night, a couple things. What is the essence of this campaign? What is the fundamental message of this campaign? If I had one thing to say on election night, when we win, what's it going to be? And I'm going to start by doing this. I'm going to say to everybody who's listening and watching the speech of the newly elected governor that in the state that launched culture wars 8 years ago, we apologize to the world. We apologize to the world, and everyone is welcome back in the state of Florida again. If we do that, if we become that sunshine state again, nobody's going to worry about a $2 rental car tax that's helping us reduce homeowners insurance in the state of Florida. Yes, ma'am.
This has to do with law and order, and what I'm talking about is ICE, and I want to know how you're going to address that. I come from a police family, and so what you see on the news, what we see in the media, there is no Miranda, no due process. People are sent out of state so that they can't have access to an attorney, and the concentration camps here in Florida and throughout the nation. And so as a governor, I'd like to know how you plan on addressing that, because these people, the people that you're wanting to bring tourist dollars in, these people, that are living here, they're our brothers and sisters, they're our families, and we need to protect them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's start with some foundational principles that are unequivocal. If somebody engages in a violent crime in the state of Florida, it doesn't matter where they come from, where they were born, they should be arrested and they should be prosecuted. Nobody would disagree with or argue that. But as I made clear earlier, the person who simply is here without documentation but is contributing every day to our economy and to our culture should be celebrated, not condemned. So what Ron DeSantis did with the ICE agreements, I would not do. I would repeal his executive order that forced these ICE agreements onto local municipalities. Now look, law enforcement agreements, cooperative law enforcement agreements happen all the time. By themselves, they're not evil, right? We use it to track sex predators, gangs, gun violence, whatever. Local law enforcement coordinates with state and feds all the time. The issue that you identified is exactly right. These ICE agreements provide no individual due process protections, none. And local law enforcement should not sign them because of that. Local law enforcement should amend them and say, if we protect individual due process, then we'll consider the cooperative agreement. The governor is wrong to force these onto local municipalities. He's wrong to do that. Right now what's happening, and this is true from conversations with state law enforcement, this governor is getting duped by the people he actually thinks he's forcing to do this. Local law enforcement, many of whom have signed these agreements, are actually not participating in the apprehension because they won't be responsible for violating individual due process. What they are doing is they're providing perimeter security or they'll provide transport. But in the words of one law enforcement officer around the state, he said, but I've told the feds that we will hold somebody for 1 hour, and if you don't come get them, we're letting them go because we're not going to participate in the violation of due process. Look, I do not think the greatest law enforcement threat we face in the state is immigration. I know that's not true. I also know that the governor should trust local law enforcement for how best to provide for safe communities. Trust them. If it is sex crimes, if it's guns, if it's gangs, or if it's immigration, local law enforcement knows best how to do that. And where local law enforcement is violating individual due process because they're following an ideology of perhaps the president, then the state should step in and remove that local law enforcement officer. But here's the biggest thing, the biggest reset I think we have to have on immigration, this conversation. It's not actually around, it is around policy, but it's around values. Look, we all agree we should have border security. I say we should have tall walls, but we should have wide gates. Border security can be accomplished. It's not hard. We know it requires physical security, electronic surveillance, digital security. It requires enough judges and judicial infrastructure to process people's claims. That's not hard. That's just resources. What's happened is the politics of all of this have turned us against each other and abandoned the values that we should have as a country. What do I mean by that? We all know the darker chapters of the history of immigration, some very, very dark chapters. 2 chapters I want to share with you tonight. Around the 1890s, the Supreme Court ruled that immigration was going to be a federal issue. That it could no longer be a state-by-state issue, that it was too cumbersome to do it that way. And so the Supreme Court determined it's going to be a federal issue. About that time, the Statue of Liberty was being installed. And many of you will remember, you've heard me talk about this. Emma Lazarus was asked to write the sonnet that today still is affixed on the Statue of Liberty. Many of us learn as children, and we can recite it tonight, that famous line. Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. That was meant as an expression of our immigration, our spirit of immigration, not our policy of border security, our spirit of immigration, to be a place where we welcome the huddled masses yearning to be free. But while we each can recite that tonight, it's the lines before that that create the context that's so important, that question who we are today and the decisions that our current leaders are making. The lines before that famous line are this: keep, O distant lands, your storied pomp. Keep, O ancient lands, your storied pomp. Meaning, old world countries, old Europe, keep. You're rich, you're famous, you're fabulous, you're successful, the best among you. Keep those. Send us, you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to be free. The next line, you're homeless, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Behold, I lift my lamp by the golden door. That's not policy, that's principle. We should be unashamed to say we're a state in a country strong enough to welcome the immigrant, to give refuge to the asylee, to the person willing to contribute peacefully every day to our economy and to our culture, that's who we are. That's who we are. And I'll tell you a second chapter of this. It involves the Statue of Liberty as well. In 1980, I was living in Miami during the Muriel boat lift. In our lifetime, this happened. This has already happened. The Cubans washed ashore in Miami, came ashore in Miami. They rounded them up and put them in the Orange Bowl Stadium and put a chain link fence around it. Distant family relatives were showing up at the chain link fence trying to identify who was there. They were bringing food. They were bringing notes. They were trying to find cousins, trying to provide refuge. And at the time, public policymakers weren't sure what to do. It was exactly the moment we're in right now. Bob Graham, Jimmy Carter, and Miami Mayor Ferre all gathered together for a summit. And Jimmy Carter, in that moment, though he later got it right, he blinked. He blinked. He got on the plane in Miami and he flew back to Washington. Bob Graham went back to Tallahassee. Mayor Ferre stood in front of the cameras in the city of Miami where he had been elected, where the Cuban population had not yet had any political clout. And he said, if we don't accept the refugee here, we might as well throw the Statue of Liberty into the East River. That's not policy, that's principle. And so, yes, let's talk about strong walls, tall walls, wide gates. Let's talk about border enforcement for people who commit violent crimes and are a threat to the community. But for people who are contributing every day, we should get ICE out of the streets and let them show up to work. That's my opinion.
I'll try to keep it short. Hi, I'm a native Floridian like you. I lived through that in 1980 as well. I lived in Dade County. But I have a kind of a more, you kind of touched on this, but more of a global question is that, and I don't like to, I pray for the day we don't have to talk about Donald Trump. However, he is a master of sucking the air and the oxygen out of the media landscape 24 hours a day. Not only that, for years, we have media outlets that are not even news anymore. They claim to be news. They label themselves as news. We have in Florida many stations, I'm sorry if this is long, many stations that are owned by Sinclair, a right-wing kind of leaning corporation. And much of what's put out on Sinclair is leans. And in my opinion, it spins to the public a certain narrative. There is not a Democratic narrative that counters this in the same way. And I wonder if the Democratic Party, and I'm hopefully you, on a leadership level, can somehow address this, because the American public deserve news that are facts. And if you want to label yourself as editorialized, label it, but don't preach it 24 hours a day like some of the outlets are doing now. And I wonder what leadership can do about that. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you what we can all do about this. Having spent 8 years in TV, having been in Congress, having been in politics my whole life, having been a Republican, an independent, and a Democrat, and I mean this, I'm not playing cheap with these words, but it is the desperation with which I wake up every day to run this campaign. The way we fix it is we win. We win. We win. When we win, we get to set the narrative. When we win, we have created a coalition so powerful that it quiets all of those voices and it pushes them back. When we win in the state of Florida, it will be the death knell of much of the MAGA infrastructure. Imagine that. For those of you who have been in Florida for a long time, imagine a 28 presidential cycle where Democratic presidential candidates and Republican presidential candidates have to come into Florida to say, what just happened and how do I have a part of this new emerging political coalition? I'm not naive to know that the media landscape and the machine will try to destroy us. I fear the days between now and Election Day, what they will do to try to destroy us. Because this race is already tied. This race in Florida is already tied. Imagine that. Last November, we lost by 15 or 16 points. The race for governor is currently tied. I started talking about health care 2 or 3 weeks ago, about my solutions, and asking Byron Donalds for his. You know what he has spent the last 2 weeks doing? Running billboards about me and Kamala Harris and trans rights. Because he's scared to death to talk about health care and the things that actually matter to people. And you know what I say on the trans issue, by the way? It actually sounds pretty old school Republican. I say, look, I still believe in a government that should stay out of your doctor's office, your bedroom, your love life, your classroom, and your library. If that sounds familiar to Republicans, because what used to be what a Republican was, right? But I say this to say we have to win. We have to win. The stuff they come at us with, both in substance and process, and I think in trying to rig the system, is real. We've seen it with the mid-cycle gerrymandering they're doing right now. We're seeing it with the removal of officials. And you better believe when this race stays tied next summer, they're going to throw everything at us. Pam Bondi has shown that there is no bottom she won't stoop to try to stop a democratic movement, right? So I worry about that. But here's what I know in the face of the challenges to democracy itself. We have to win and win by more. And when we win by more, we get to set the rules. We get to set the agenda, and we get to set the narrative. If it sounds like desperation, it's because it is. This is my last run, folks. As I mentioned, I haven't run in 10 years. This is it for me. I'm only doing this because I know in this moment we've got a shot. We've got a shot for your kids and for my kids. Here's what I'll close with. I'll close with this. I'm going to ask you all to do one thing tonight. Some of you have heard me do this. I close every assembly with this. Yes, I need your support. Yes, I need your help. Certainly support Indivisible, support your candidates, support Jolly if you can, financially or on the streets or making phone calls. Do it. I'm going to ask you to do something far more fundamental tonight. What I'm going to ask you to do is simply believe. Believe. Believe as my wife and I do. When we got into this race, we had to ask ourselves 2 questions. Do we believe we can win? And if we do we believe we can make a difference? And we decided that we do. We believe that in this moment, we believe in this moment that we can win. I'm asking you to believe. And here's the good news. You already do. You already do. You already do, because you're already doing what's within reach. You are here tonight not to hear a politician wax on too long and with long answers that maybe are boring you. You're here because you believe that this is a moment where we can come together and win. And the reason I know that is because if you didn't believe it, you would be home Googling Portugal. Those of you who are laughing have considered leaving the country. Those of you who haven't, go home and Google, if I leave the United States, where should I go? And it's Portugal, but I want us to all be here in Florida next November. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, remain calm. Before you go, don't sit down, but before you go, we just need your help for a second. Thank you so much. I just want to remind us tonight that there's nobody in this room that's feeling disheartened, disillusioned, or despair. And I want you to remember that the next time someone asks you, what can I do? That you can just tell them, you do what you can. You do what you can, and you reassure them that there are millions of American citizens doing just that, and look where we are today. We've never stopped believing. So I just want to make sure we take a second. Can we give the church and Pastor LeClaire another round of applause? Thank you so much for having us. I also want to let you know, I know that there are a lot of you that are parked out back. We're going to do our best as you're exiting to have some flashlights to guide you to your car. And if not, guys, by the way, we have a safety team. Please say whoa. And our safety team will help escort you as well. Finally, and I'm so grateful
to David for bringing up the issue of raising funds. Every time we gather, we always do our best to contribute. On the way out, if you can contribute to our Indivisible group, we are so grateful. So one more time, a round of applause for all of us. An incredible evening. Thank you again. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, guys. Everybody stop. Look down. Look around. Is there anything on the ground? We want to make sure that we can efficiently pick up anything that you've got on the way out. And don't leave any belongings. Thank you.